and thanks for tuning in to A Bite of Wellness. I'm Chef Ricardo from Wellness in the Schools. For today's episode, Wellness in the Schools Chef Kisha will demonstrate how she utilizes ingredients from Puerto Rican cuisine to prepare a meal of mashed yuca, also known as cassava, alongside pollo asado or roasted chicken. We hope that you appreciate how Chef Kisha will utilize both seasonings and cooking techniques to create a health-supportive meal that not only balances flavor and nourishment, but also respects her cultural traditions.
I'm Chef Kisha. I'm so happy to be here today to share with you a root vegetable that's near and dear to my heart, and that is the yuca. Yuca is something that I grew up with, and many Hispanic or Latino cultures are very familiar with it. So growing up, my mom cooked this a lot. It was done in different ways. I had it boiled, I had it mashed, I had it in soups, every which way you could imagine, and I even had it as a dessert. So this is very versatile. It's so much better, in my opinion, than the potato. It has a very similar texture, and it tastes so much better. So when you're going to purchase yuca, you want to make sure that it's firm to the touch. You don't want to see any dark spots or and feel any mushy spots, because that's going to tell you that it's no good. And yuca is something that once it's taken out of the ground, it doesn't last very long, so that's why you'll always see a wax coating on it, and that helps preserve it. So a trick, if you want it to last a little bit longer at home, a trick would be to peel it and put it in water and keep it in the refrigerator. And you want to change that water every couple of days so it doesn't go bad on you. But yuca doesn't last long in my house, because as soon as we buy it, we cook it. I love it that much. Anyway, so I'm going to show you how to peel this. So one more thing I wanted to talk about is that when you're purchasing yuca, you want to make sure that the ends kind of taper off a bit, because that's going to ensure that the inside, which is very fibrous, is kind of small, so you're not just buying the fibrous part. So anyway, we're going to put this on a level surface, make sure it doesn't rock too much, and I'm going to cut into it. So I'm just going to turn it around. I'm going to cut this end and be very careful because it's kind of hard. And maybe, you know what, I'm going to cut it into pieces that I can manage. And again, it's very difficult. It's very hard. So just be very careful. Take your time. Don't rush through it. All right. So we're going to put that to the side, and I'm going to show you. This is a good example as to what you don't want to see. So you see these little dots here? That means it's starting to turn, but no big deal, because you can cut that part out. So you see it here a little bit too. And sometimes you'll see in the supermarkets where they'll actually cut an end off to show you that it's good. So you don't have to break it in there, because sometimes it's a little bit difficult to judge whether or not it's good if the ends aren't exposed. And what a lot of people tend to do, me especially when I go buy yuca, I'm definitely going to try to break off the ends to make sure that it's not spotty that way. But it's okay. We're going to cut that part off. So I said we could use a vegetable peeler, which is great, but I tend to do it a different way. And I don't know if you can see, there's a little line that goes right across, and that kind of separates the flesh from the peel. And that comes off in perfect pieces. And I'm going to show you how. And again, you want to make sure that it's as level as possible, that it's not shaking around. And then you're going to cut into it just a little bit. Just a little bit. And then you're going to get your knife in there, and you'll see how it'll just peel right off. See how it's peeling right off? And this part you want to get rid of completely. And you see how it separates? It separates quite easily. Okay, so I just finished peeling and cutting up my yuca. We're going to get it into a pot of boiling water. And you want to make sure, especially when you're working with root vegetables, that you put them in a pot water that's boiling already, so this way it won't get waterlogged. I wanted to show you a few different cuts. Now, when I'm boiling my yuca, I want to make sure that it's in small pieces so it'll cook quickly. So maybe like 1/2-inch pieces, maybe a little bit larger. Now, if you're putting it in a stew, because you want to be able to find the yuca in your stew because it will break down. So I usually tend to cut it a little bit bigger. Now, there's a dish that a lot of Latino and Hispanic households will know about, and it's called verdura. And verdura is usually when you take a whole bunch of different root vegetables, you boil it, you put a little bit of olive oil and garlic, sometimes maybe a little saltfish. This is comfort food. So when you're doing something like the verdura, which is different root vegetables, you want to find, healthier or more substantial pieces. And typically it's done with different yams, yautia, malanga, all these beautiful, beautiful root vegetables that a lot of Latin households are very familiar with. So you want bigger pieces. So this is how you would cut it if you're going to make yuca fries. It's sort of like batons. But we're going to cut this down because it's going in my pot because we are making mashed yuca. And so I want to get it into smaller pieces so to cook quickly. I'm just going to break that down and we're going to get it in our water. So here we go. We're going to get this in our pot carefully. Okay, so I just checked the yuca. It's going to take a couple more minutes before it's fork tender. But while we're waiting for that to cook, I'm going to talk about the flavors that we're going to add to our mashed yuca. So the recipe that you're going to receive talks about roasting your garlic. And when you roast garlic, it brings out the sweetness of the garlic. It dulls the flavor down a little bit. It's not that sharpness that, that we may be familiar with, and some people may not like that sharpness. So by roasting it, it brings out the sweetness. Now, I kind of like that sharp flavor. So another thing about that is that when you're roasting garlic, it takes a long time. It takes about an hour. So if you do choose to roast your garlic with this recipe, make sure that's the first thing that you do and then work on everything else. But I'm going to show you a shortcut that's going to give you a little bit of sweetness in your dish, but that garlic flavor is really going to be pronounced. So we're actually going to saute the garlic in a little bit of olive oil, and that's sort of like a quick way to get that flavor and not spend the whole hour in the oven. Anyway, so I'm going to break down my garlic. I'm going to use about 2 cloves of garlic because it's not a whole lot of yuca. And again, I want to taste the yuca more than I taste the garlic. So I'm just going to cut off the ends of my garlic. And now it should be easier to peel, but I could also just give it a little whack. Not too much because I don't want to crush my garlic clove, but just enough to break up the skin to make it easier to peel. So if you don't want an overpowering garlic taste, cut it into larger pieces. Again, I don't want this mashed yuca to be overwhelmed with garlic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut slices. And this is how I am going to saute my garlic. It's going to give it garlic flavor, but it's not going to overwhelm the dish. If I were to use a microplate and just get that, I'm releasing all the oils in the garlic, so there's going to be a lot of garlic flavor, and what I'm going to be tasting first is the garlic and not the yuca, so we're not going to do it this way. So we're going to turn this on. Get a little bit of olive oil in there. Just a little bit, you don't need much. And we could wait for that to heat up, or we can go ahead and throw it in there. I just throw it in there. I don't wait for the garlic to, for the oil to heat up because I find that it gives the oil a lot more flavor. We're going to give the garlic a little bit of color, not too much, because if you give it too much, if it starts to brown too much, it'll start turning bitter. So you're doing 2 things. You're mellowing out the garlic, and you're also infusing that oil with the flavor of the garlic. And I'm actually going to turn the heat off now, so the residual heat is going to continue cooking that garlic without me worrying whether or not it's going to burn. Okay, so we have our yuca ready, and as you can see, it's fork tender, so the fork goes right through it and it breaks it up. So that's when you know that your yuca is ready. So we're gonna flavor this, again, with the sauteed garlic that we have in the olive oil. So we're just gonna pour that right on it. Just gonna get that right in there. And this recipe requires a little bit of warmed half and half. So we're just gonna warm up the half and half right in this pot. So we're gonna warm up the half and half. While that's getting heated up, I'm gonna add a little bit of the salt, the butter, and the black pepper. So we're gonna start off with maybe half a teaspoon of salt. And remember, there's already salt in it, maybe a quarter teaspoon of salt. There's already salt in it because we used a little bit of salt when we boiled the cassava or the yuca. And cassava is just another name for yuca. So we're going to use unsalted butter because remember, we already have salt in the yuca. The recipe requires a little bit of salt, and we want to be able to control that. So it's always best to use, unless your recipe states otherwise, it's always better to use unsalted butter. So I'm going to eyeball it. So this is about 4 tablespoons. And that looks like a lot of butter, doesn't it? It's 4 tablespoons. Okay, I'm just going to put that in there. It's about half a stick of butter. And the warmth of the yuca is going to melt that butter. All right, so we're going to fold our yuca over our butter just to speed up the melting of the butter. And we don't want to process this too much because just like with potatoes, if you process it too much, if you mix it too much, it starts to get a little gluey. So that's not the texture that we want. Now this recipe also calls for a little bit of nutmeg. Now nutmeg isn't something typically found in the Latin kitchen, but it's actually going to add a really nice flavor. So I'm just going to scrape a little bit in there, not too much, just a little bit, just enough to give it a little bit more dimension. And I like buying or using whole nutmeg because the flavor lasts. You can store this in your cabinet a lot longer than the one that's already ground. Now, one thing I also wanted to mention is that I saved some of the liquid that I boiled the yuca in. So in the event that this isn't enough liquid for my yuca and it's too thick, I can always add a little bit of this liquid without dulling the flavor. So my milk looks just about ready. And we don't want to bring this to boil because we don't want it to break. We don't want it to curdle. And I'm just going to pour that right into my yuca. And this may look like a lot of liquid, but this yuca is really going to act like a sponge. So we're going to add a little bit of black pepper. And I'm just going to eyeball this. If you don't like the little black specks, you could always use a white pepper. But I kind of like the specks. I think it makes it look a little bit more interesting. Now, I notice that this is still a little bit chunky, so I really have to put some mussels in it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back. Okay, great. So we're back. We're going to start working on what's going to accompany our mashed yuca. And we're actually going to be roasting some chicken thighs with a mojo marinade. So we're going to do mojo 2 ways. We're going to do a raw one, and we're going to do a cooked one that's going to be poured over after our chicken is cooked. So we're going to start off with a large white onion. Now typically mojo is cooked, but each family, I'm just going to cut this in half because it'll just be easier for me to slice. Each family has their own mojo recipe. In my household, as I was growing up, the mojo was never cooked. And the mojo consisted of garlic, olive oil, some type of acid, which was usually vinegar, salt, and pepper. And that would sit out. It would, all the flavors would melt together. And this is what we would pour on just about anything, especially when it came to tostones. This is what we use. So I'm just going to slice up my onion. Again, be very careful. And I'm going to leave my onions in rather long slices. I like the texture. Now, again, we're going to do this 2 ways. We're going to cook half of it, and the other half is going to go on our chicken as a marinade. So remembering to keep those fingers tucked in. And once it becomes a little bit wobbly, don't be afraid just to put it at an angle that's easier. Even though the cut's going to be a little bit different, but that's okay because we're going to cook that. So we have our onion. Half of my onion is going to go into the pot. This is what we're going to use again after our chicken is cooked. So I'm going to take about half of that, maybe even a little bit more. So let's say about 2/3. And the rest is going to get cooked for our mojo that we're going to pour over. Cutting off the ends of the garlic. Now with mojo, I think I mentioned earlier that depending on how you cut your garlic, that's the type of intensity of garlic intensity that you're going to get. Now with mojo, you really want to taste the garlic, right? So I am going to use the grater for that because I want a lot of intense flavor. Okay, so I just finished breaking down my garlic, making sure all the skin was off. And like I mentioned earlier, depending on what flavor you want or how intense you want your garlic flavor is how you're going to cut it. In the mojo, you want intense garlic flavor. So I am actually going to use the microplane. So mojo is something that you can put just about anywhere, and it's sort of, I like to call it a Latino ketchup, right? Because you can put ketchup on anything. You can put mojo on anything. And mojo could be just as simple as a little bit of garlic. You can use just about any type of acid in your mojo. Typically it's vinegar, it could be lime, it could be lemon, and it could also be something called naranja agria, which literally translates to bitter orange. And that's just going to give it a really nice, authentic flavor. But if you can't find the naranja agria, which I'm going to show you in a little bit, just use any type of acid. Okay, so another pretty much essential part of a mojo is the bay leaf. So I'm actually just going to put 1, maybe 2 bay leaves in our pot. And you want to remember to take this out after it's done cooking. Now, bay leaf is going to impart a very earthy flavor. A little bit of black pepper. I'm going to sprinkle that in there. I'm just going to eyeball it. Just a small amount of salt, because remember, everything else has salt. And that's going to help the onion cook, actually, to soften up a little bit. Our oil. Like I said, I'm going to put about a cup of oil in here. And now we're going to talk about our acid. All right. So remember I said naranja agria was pretty much one of the key ingredients in our authentic mojo. And if you don't have naranja agria, it's okay. You can use any other acid. You can use vinegar. You can use lime juice. You can use lemon juice. Whatever acid you have is fine. So, but we're actually going to use the naranja agria. And you can find this at any Latin American supermarket or even an Asian supermarket. You'd be able to find this. So we're going to give this a little roll because we're going to juice it. And the reason I was rolling it is to break down all the membranes inside. And that's just going to help me juice it a lot quicker. So another interesting part about naranja agria or bitter orange is that it is full of seeds. You definitely want to use a reamer or a juicer that's going to hold on to those seeds so you don't have to pick them out later. Another trick, if you want to get a lot of juice out of citrus, if you microwave it for a couple of seconds, say maybe about 15-20 seconds, that also helps break down the membranes within the fruit. So let's see how much juice. We didn't get much juice out of this, but that's okay because I'll add a little bit of vinegar, and we'll just pour that right in there. Okay, so I'm actually going to zest this naranja. And as you're zesting, you want to make sure that you're moving your citrus because you just want to get to that white part. You don't want to go deeper because that white part is called the pith and it's very bitter. So you really don't want that. It's going to just give it an off taste. So you just want that outer colorful skin. And it doesn't take too long for this to cook. And you just want your onions to become a little bit, to soften up a bit. You don't want any color in this. You just try to get all the flavors from your bay leaf, your garlic, your whatever acid you're using to shine through. You don't want any color in this. All right, so I'm going to cut the heat off of this because, again, we don't want our onions to get too soft. We want to be able to bite into that onion without the sharpness, but definitely with the texture. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pour everything over our chicken, and just like magic, here's our chicken. So we're going to be using chicken thighs for this recipe. I'm going to pour our naranja agria juice. Let me cover this up so I don't get any seeds in there. I'm going to pour juice all over our chicken. And not only is this going to impart flavor, it's also going to help tenderize our chicken. I'm going to get everything in there. Our onions, our garlic, get a little bit of salt. And just for the sake of marinating it, we'll throw 1 bay leaf in there, or maybe 2. And just a little bit, just a touch of vinegar, just a touch. Not too much, because we already have the naranja agria in there. So we'll give that a good mix. Okay, so our chicken has marinated in the refrigerator for about half an hour. So I'm going to take a little bit of olive oil just to drizzle. So I'm actually going to take this and I'm just going to move it around the pan and get that oil everywhere. And we want skin side up. And we definitely want everything that's in here. And we can just like throw that right on top of our chicken. And those onions are going to caramelize as the chicken cooks. And we're going to get this into a 350-degree oven. So we're going to talk a little bit about agua frescas. And agua frescas, literally translated, means fresh waters. So today we're going to make a hibiscus agua fresca. And hibiscus is also known as flor de Jamaica, which literally means flower of Jamaica. And I have some here. Some recipes call for you to boil the water. I particularly don't like boiling the water because what I find is that whatever citrus, whatever herb, whatever it is that I'm using in the water, it tends to dull the flavor. So I like doing it as a sun tea. And sun teas are done by using room temperature water. You add whatever fruits, whatever herbs, whatever greens that you're going to put in it, and you just leave it in the refrigerator for 24 hours. So that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to take my hibiscus, and I'm going to pour maybe about a 1/4 cup. And you'll see how immediately it's starting to turn color. And the longer this sits, the deeper the color is going to be. Typically, I would leave this in the refrigerator for 24 hours. And I'm actually going to infuse fruit juices in it from this orange and from this lime. I'm going to take half of my orange. And I'm actually going to juice some of this, juice my orange right into my hibiscus agua fresca. And I'm using a fork, and I'm not worried about the seeds at this point simply because I have to strain it anyway. And once this is ready, I'm going to slice up my fruit and actually add that to it as well. I don't like adding the whole fruit in it and letting it stay a while because what I find is that because of the pith, it starts to go a little bit too bitter. So I wait till the very end before I throw my fresh fruit in there. Okay? Okay, so we're going to start plating now. We're going to start off with our mashed yuca. Our chicken, our beautiful chicken. We'll finish it off with our mogo. Be careful not to pick up that bay leaf because the bay leaf is an edible. A dish isn't complete without an avocado. So One thing about picking avocados, you want to make sure that they give a little bit to the touch before you cut into it. And something that my mom taught me is that when you're buying an avocado, a good way to tell whether or not it's good or not is if you see that little part right there, that little stem part, if you take that off, and if it's a bright green inside, it's good. If it's dark, it's not good.
And so here we are after the cooking demonstration. I'm happy to be joined by Chef Kisha and Chef Giselle as well. And we are going to be taste testing, and I'm really excited.
I'm excited as well.
This smells amazing.
It does, doesn't it?
It's just those like simple ingredients that could just transform food into something magical.
Absolutely.
And you know, I think in Latin communities, right, we love an abundant plate, especially when we have friends, family, guests over in our house. I think it's important to remember we can really overflow our plate if we remember to make most of our plate things that are good for us, like fruits and vegetables, like what you've done here. Kisha.
Okay, great. That's a great idea because I remember growing up, if your plate wasn't overflowing with food, it wasn't the correct serving size, right? But we've learned that portion control is key, right? For good health.
Now that we've got our agua fresca and all our food, why don't we go ahead and eat?
Aprovecha.
Aprovecha.
Ah, it's good.
That's nice.
Now, it's not very sweet because we didn't add any sweetener, but there's a slight sweetness from the orange juice. And you can always add a little bit of honey. Typically, agua frescas use sugar, but we can use honey or an alternative sweetener. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Well, that yuca's nice. Not too garlicky, not too overwhelming. It's the star of the show, like you mentioned.
You know, Chef Kisha, growing up, in my household, we made our yuca cooked with some garlic and some sour orange, or some lime juice. And, well, I'm not gonna lie, my tias always use some pork fat in it. But I love what you did here with your yuca and your mojo.
What I like is that the flavor profile is very easily adaptable to a lot of different dishes, and there's an easy way to make this vegan too.
Absolutely, especially with the yuca. Instead of using butter, you can just use the olive oil. You can really skip the cream. I think next time I make this recipe, I'm going to use a little less cream because I could really taste it, and not that the cream's a bad thing. But I really love the taste of yuca, so I'd like to highlight that a little bit more. So next time, I may even skip the cream altogether.
Actually, practically all of the ingredients we use, the both of you would agree, are pretty health supportive. It's a lot of people have this weird misconception that Hispanic cuisine can be unhealthy or that it's just like a Tex-Mex sort of style thing, but there's a lot of variety and there's a lot of space for healthy foods.
There's a lot of freshness in it as well. A lot of vegetables, although we're not known for our green salads, we're definitely known for our root vegetables.
Yeah, we are.
And like I said, avocado is something like, it's something that no matter what you're eating, if it's a stew, if it's a soup, whatever it is, a piece of avocado on your plate, there's always a piece of avocado on your plate.
But what I like about this dish too is if we did this with a little bit of white fish or bacalao, all these flavors would just be in the right place and in the right amounts.
Absolutely.
Es delicioso.
Another thing I love about the mojo, you can either cook it or you can have it raw. And if you make it raw, it's good to do it the day before, and it'll kill some of the bitterness of the onion.
And the way you did it here, where you had some of the raw mixed in with some of the fresh, also just kind of gives it a distinct flavor too. Thanks for inviting us over to be your taste tester, Chef Kisha.
Thank you for having me. And I love sitting down with good friends and good people.
And good food.
Yes. Just like at home.
Nuestra familia de trabajo, our work family.
Yay! I love you guys.
And thanks for everyone here for joining us on A Bite of Wellness.
Yes.
We'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Buen provecho.